Marcus Reynolds stood in front of the mirror in his private jet's bathroom, adjusting his expensive silk tie. At 45, he was one of New York's most successful real estate developers, with buildings bearing his name across the city skyline. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his tailored suit showed off his athletic build. But the reflection staring back at him held a hint of emptiness that even his billions couldn't fill. "Sir, we'll be landing at JFK in 20 minutes, his assistant called through the door. Marcus splashed some cold water on his face. He had to stay focused. Today was about closing the biggest deal of his career, a $5 billion development project that would transform downtown Manhattan. He couldn't let old memories distract him, especially not today. But as he walked back to his leather seat, his mind drifted to where it always went when he let his guard down, to Christina, his ex-wife, the woman who'd walked away from him 5 years ago, leaving nothing but a note saying she needed to find herself. Christina Taylor had been different from anyone else in his world. She was a talented artist who taught art at an inner-city school, with a smile that could light up a room and a heart bigger than all of Manhattan. When they met at a charity gala 7 years ago, she'd been the only person who wasn't impressed by his wealth or status. Instead, she'd challenged him about the lack of art programs in underprivileged schools. Their whirlwind romance had scandalized New York society. A black teacher from Brooklyn and one of the city's most eligible bachelors. The tabloids had a field day, but Marcus didn't care. For the first time in his life, he'd found someone who saw past his bank account to the man underneath. They married after 6 months, despite his mother's protests and the whispers at every social event. Those first 2 years had been the happiest of his life. But then things started to change. The pressure of society life, the constant scrutiny, the subtle and not so subtle racism at every turn, it all started taking its toll on Christina. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, pulling Marcus from his memories. His phone immediately lit up with messages from his executive team. The development deal was hanging by a thread. His biggest rival, James Harrison, was trying to swoop in and steal it from under him. "The board meeting starts in an hour, sir," his assistant, Sarah, reminded him as they rushed through the private terminal. "Mr. Harrison has apparently made a counteroffer." Marcus barely heard her, because there in the main terminal, visible through the glass walls, stood a familiar figure he'd know anywhere. Christina. His heart stopped. She looked even more beautiful than he remembered, her long braids now styled in elegant twists, wearing a simple sundress that showed off her graceful figure. But that wasn't what made his world tilt on its axis. Standing on either side of her, holding her hands, were 2 little boys. They looked about 4 years old, with caramel-colored skin and striking green eyes. Eyes that were identical to his own. His knees went weak as he stared at their faces, seeing his own features reflected back at him. "Sir? Sir, we need to go. The car is waiting," Sarah urged, pulling at his sleeve, but Marcus couldn't move. His feet felt cemented to the floor as he watched Christina kneel down to help one of the boys tie his shoelace. The other boy was bouncing excitedly, pointing at planes through the window. They were the spitting image of him at that age. The truth hit him like a physical blow. Christina had been pregnant when she left. She'd been carrying his children, his sons, and she'd never told him. "Cancel the meeting," he heard himself say. "But sir, the development deal, cancel everything." His voice was firm, even though his world was spinning. "There's something more important I need to deal with." He started walking toward the main terminal, his heart pounding with each step. Christina stood up, and for a moment their eyes met across the crowded airport. He saw the shock register on her face, followed by fear. She quickly grabbed both boys' hands, turning to hurry them away. "Christina!" he called out, his voice carrying over the airport noise. She froze and slowly turned back to face him. The twins looked up curiously, their green eyes, his eyes, wide with interest, as they studied him. "Hello, Marcus," she said softly, her voice still having the same effect on him after all these years. "Were you ever going to tell me?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion as he looked at the boys. Tears filled her eyes. I wanted to so many times." The boys were watching their exchange with innocent curiosity. One of them tugged on Christina's dress. "Mommy, who's that man?" Marcus felt his heart constrict at being called that man by his own sons, sons he hadn't even known existed until this moment. "We need to talk," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Now." Christina looked around helplessly as if searching for an escape route, but they both knew this conversation was 5 years overdue. "Boys," she said gently, "how would you like to get some ice cream?" The twins' faces lit up, and Marcus felt a fresh wave of pain, realizing he'd missed every smile, every laugh, every milestone of their lives so far. As they walked toward the airport restaurant, Marcus couldn't take his eyes off the boys. They had his height for their age, his nose, even the way one of them furrowed his brow, exactly like Marcus did when he was thinking. "Their names," he said quietly to Christina. "Please, at least tell me their names," she swallowed hard. "Michael and Marcus Jr., she whispered. "But everyone calls them Mike and MJ, Marcus Jr. There was a son out there named after him, and he hadn't known for 4 years. The magnitude of what he'd missed crashed over him like a tidal wave. The boys ran ahead to the ice cream counter, their excited chatter filling the air. Marcus watched them, memorizing every detail of their faces, their movements, their voices. Why? It was all he could manage to ask. Christina's hands trembled as she clutched her purse. "It's complicated, Marcus. I was scared, overwhelmed. Your world was suffocating me, and when I found out I was pregnant with twins, I panicked. So you decided to disappear, to keep my children from me." His voice cracked with emotion. "Do they even know about me?" "They know their daddy is a successful businessman," she said quietly. "They ask about you sometimes. I have pictures. I never wanted them to think they weren't loved." Marcus ran a hand over his face, trying to process everything. "But you didn't think I deserved to know them, to love them in person instead of being some vague story?" Before she could answer, the twins ran back to them, their faces glowing with excitement. "Mommy, they have chocolate chip cookie dough," MJ announced. "And mint chocolate chip," Mike added. Looking at their innocent faces, Marcus made a decision. That would change everything. The development deal, his meetings, his empire, none of it mattered compared to this moment. "Would it be okay if I joined you for ice cream?" he asked, directing the question to both Christina and the boys. The twins looked at their mother questioningly. Christina hesitated for a long moment before nodding slowly. As they sat down with their ice cream, Marcus watched his sons dig into their treats with enthusiasm. He had missed so much, but he silently vowed that would end today. Nothing would keep him from being part of their lives now. "Do you like planes?" he asked them, remembering how one of them had been pointing at the aircraft earlier. "I love them," Mike exclaimed. "I'm going to be a pilot when I grow up." "No way, we're going to build tall buildings," MJ argued. "Like the ones in Manhattan." Marcus felt his throat tighten. His son wanted to follow in his footsteps without even knowing who he was. Christina was watching him carefully, tears glistening in her eyes. She could see the pain and love warring on his face as he interacted with their sons for the first time. The boys chatted happily, unaware of the emotional storm brewing between their parents. They told Marcus about their school, their friends, their favorite games. With each word, each gesture, each laugh, they unknowingly wrapped themselves tighter around their father's heart. Finally, when the ice cream was finished and the boys were busy drawing on the paper placemats with crayons provided by the waitress, Marcus turned to Christina. "We need to figure this out," he said quietly. "I've missed too much already. I want to be their father, really be their father." Christina nodded slowly. She whispered, "I see now that keeping them from you was wrong. I was trying to protect them from the chaos of your world, but they deserve to know their father." Marcus looked at his sons, his beautiful, perfect sons, and made a silent promise. He would find a way to make this work. He would be the father they deserved, even if it meant completely reorganizing his life. The world of billion-dollar deals and corporate takeovers seemed distant and unimportant now. In its place was something far more precious, the chance to know and love his children. The news about Marcus Reynolds' secret twin sons spread through New York's elite circles like wildfire. His mother, Eleanor Reynolds, nearly fainted when she saw the morning newspaper's headline, Real estate tycoon discovers hidden heirs at JFK. Eleanor burst into Marcus's penthouse office, waving the newspaper. Her perfectly styled silver hair and designer suit couldn't hide her agitation. "Why didn't you tell me immediately?" she demanded. "I had to find out about my own grandchildren from page 6. Marcus looked up from his desk, where he'd been staring at a photo of the twins he'd taken at the airport. "I'm still processing it myself, Mother." "Well, we need to handle this properly," Eleanor said, sitting down and pulling out her phone. "I'll call our PR team. We need to control the narrative. And of course, we'll need DNA tests." "Stop." Marcus's voice was firm. "They're mine. One look at them and there's no doubt. They have my eyes, my expressions. They're my sons." "Marcus, darling, I know you're emotional right now, but we need to be practical. That woman is their mother, and her name is Christina." Marcus stood up, his temper rising. "And she's the woman I was married to. Or did you forget that?" Eleanor flinched. "How could I forget? She abandoned you and apparently took your heirs with her." Before Marcus could respond, his assistant Sarah rushed in. "Sir, Mr. Harrison is on line 1. He's threatening to go public with accusations that you deliberately missed yesterday's meeting to manipulate the stock prices." Marcus loosened his tie. The development deal, he'd completely forgotten about it in the chaos of discovering his sons. $5 billion on the line, and for the first time in his life, business wasn't his first priority. "Tell him I'll call him back," Marcus said, grabbing his jacket. "Where are you going?" Eleanor demanded. "This is a crisis." "No, Mother. This is an opportunity to fix the biggest mistake of my life." Marcus drove his Ferrari through Brooklyn's streets, following the address Christina had reluctantly given him yesterday. He pulled up in front of a charming brownstone with flower boxes in the windows. It was a far cry from his Manhattan penthouse, but he could immediately see Christina's artistic touch in the hand-painted welcome sign and the colorful garden. The door opened before he could knock. Christina stood there in jeans and a simple blouse, looking like she hadn't slept. "The boys are at school," she said quietly. "I know. We need to talk, really talk." She led him into a cozy living room filled with children's artwork and family photos. Marcus's heart clenched as he saw the progression of his sons' lives captured in frames. Their first steps, birthday parties, first day of preschool. All moments he should have been part of. "They're happy, Marcus," Christina said, watching him look at the photos. "They're loved. They have a good life. A life without their father." He turned to face her. "I want to be part of their lives, Christina. I want to know them, love them, support them. I want to be their dad." Tears filled her eyes. "It's not that simple. Your world, it's exactly what I was trying to protect them from. The pressure, the spotlight, the expectations." "I'm not the same man I was 5 years ago," Marcus interrupted. "Losing you changed me. And now, knowing about the boys, nothing else matters as much as being their father." A knock at the door interrupted them. Christina opened it to reveal an older woman with kind eyes. "Oh, I didn't know you had company," the woman said. "I just brought over some of the boys' favorite cookies." "Thanks, Mrs. Johnson." Christina turned to Marcus. "This is our neighbor. She helps watch the boys sometimes." Mrs. Johnson's eyes widened as she recognized him. You're their father, aren't you? I saw it in the news this morning. Those boys do have your eyes." Marcus smiled warmly at the woman who'd been part of his sons' lives when he couldn't be. "Thank you for looking after them," after Mrs. Johnson left. Christina sank onto the couch. "See? It's already starting. The attention, the gossip." "We can handle it together," Marcus said, sitting beside her. "Christina, tell me what really made you leave. The whole truth." She was quiet for a long moment. "I found out I was pregnant the day of your mother's charity gala. I was going to tell you that night, but then I overheard her talking to her friends. She said she was glad I hadn't gotten pregnant yet because the family wasn't ready for—" Christina's voice cracked. "For mixed-race grandchildren." Marcus felt like he'd been punched. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were under so much pressure already. The company was expanding, you were working 18-hour days, and I saw how torn you were between your world and mine. When I heard your mother that night, something just broke. I couldn't bear the thought of our children facing that kind of prejudice from their own grandmother." So you decided to face everything alone instead? I went to stay with my sister in Atlanta. I was going to tell you, but then the pregnancy got complicated. The doctors put me on bed rest. By the time the boys were born, it just seemed easier to stay away. You had your empire to build. Marcus reached for her hand. No, empire is worth missing my children's lives. I want to make this right, Christina. Not just with the boys, but with you too. Before she could respond, they heard excited voices outside. The front door burst open, and Mike and MJ ran in, followed by a young woman who must be their teacher. Mommy, we learned about dinosaurs today, Mike announced, and I drew a T-Rex, MJ added. Then they noticed Marcus, and both boys fell silent, looking between him and their mother with curious expressions. Hey, you're the man from the airport, MJ said. The one who had ice cream with us. Marcus's heart raced. This was the moment. He looked at Christina, who gave him a small nod. Boys, she said gently, there's something very important Mommy needs to tell you about our friend Marcus. The twins climbed onto the couch between them, their green eyes, his eyes, wide with anticipation. Marcus held his breath, knowing. The next few minutes would change all their lives forever. Christina took both boys' hands in hers. Remember how you always ask about your daddy? About where he is and what he does? The boys nodded eagerly. Well, she continued, her voice trembling slightly, Marcus is your daddy. There was a moment of complete silence. Then Mike turned to, Study Marcus's face carefully. Is that why we have the same eyes? He asked innocently. Marcus felt tears threatening to fall. Yes, buddy, that's exactly why. MJ looked confused. But where were you before? Why didn't you live with us like Tommy's? Daddy lives with him? The simple question held so much hurt and confusion that Marcus had to swallow hard before he could answer. I didn't know about you, he said honestly. But now that I do, I want to be the best daddy I can be, if you'll let me. The boys looked at each other, seeming to have one of those silent conversations that twins often share. Then, to everyone's surprise, MJ climbed into Marcus's lap. Can you teach me how to build tall buildings? He asked hopefully. Marcus wrapped his arms around his son, for the first time. I'll teach you everything I know, buddy. Not to be left out, Mike squeezed in next to them. Will you come to our school play? I'm going to be a tiger. I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world, Marcus promised, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus sat in the front row of the elementary school auditorium, watching Mike roar enthusiastically in his tiger costume. Next to him, Christina beamed with pride, while MJ bounced excitedly in his seat, waving to his brother on stage. It had been 2 weeks since the airport encounter that changed everything, and Marcus hadn't missed a single moment with his sons since then. But not everyone was happy about the new family arrangement. In the back of the auditorium, Eleanor Reynolds sat stiffly, her disapproving gaze fixed on Christina rather than her performing grandson. She'd insisted on coming to support the family image, but her presence added tension to what should have been a purely joyful occasion. After the play, as families gathered in the school cafeteria for cookies and juice, Eleanor cornered Marcus by the punch bowl. Darling, we need to discuss how you're handling this situation, she said, keeping her voice low. The board is concerned. Harrison Development is using your personal drama to undermine our position with investors. Marcus watched his sons proudly, showing their father's tie to their friends, telling everyone that their daddy came to see the play. The board will have to deal with it, he said firmly. My sons come first now. That's exactly the attitude that's causing problems, Eleanor hissed. You've missed 3 crucial meetings this week to attend a school play and a soccer practice. The media is having a field day and our stock prices are dropping. Before Marcus could respond, Mike ran up to them, his tiger makeup slightly smudged. Daddy, did you see when I scared the hunter? Was I a scary tiger? Marcus knelt down to his son's level, straightening the crooked whiskers painted on his face. You were the scariest tiger I've ever seen, buddy. I bet even real tigers would run away from you. Mike beamed with pride, then noticed Eleanor. His smile faded slightly. Last week, during their first meeting, she'd insisted on calling the boys Michael and Marcus Jr., despite being told they preferred Mike and MJ. She'd also made several comments about their need for proper upbringing, that had upset Christina. "Hello, grandmother," Mike said politely, using the formal title she'd demanded. Eleanor barely acknowledged him before turning back to Marcus. "The Harrison situation needs your immediate attention. They're meeting with our Chinese investors tomorrow." "Actually," Christina interrupted, joining them with MJ, "Marcus promised to take the boys to the zoo tomorrow. They've been looking forward to it all week." Eleanor's perfectly painted lips tightened. "Surely the zoo can wait. These investments are worth billions." "No, Mother, it can't wait," Marcus said firmly. "I promised my sons, and I'm not breaking that promise." Later that night, after dropping Christina and the boys home, Marcus sat in his penthouse office looking at the latest financial reports. The situation was worse than he'd thought. Harrison Development had successfully convinced several key investors to withdraw their support, citing unstable leadership at Reynolds Enterprises. His phone buzzed with a text from Christina. The boys wanted to say goodnight to their daddy. Below was a photo of Mike and MJ in their matching dinosaur pajamas, grinning at the camera. All thoughts of business troubles melted away as he looked at their faces. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Christina's brownstone early, excited for their zoo trip. But he found her pacing anxiously in the living room while the boys finished breakfast in the kitchen. "Have you seen the morning news?" she asked, holding up her tablet. The headline made his blood run cold. "Reynolds Enterprise heir apparent. DNA test demands heat up as shareholders question." Twin claims. "Your mother's doing?" Christina asked quietly. Marcus ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "She wouldn't dare. This has Harrison written all over it." "The boys don't need this, Marcus. They're just starting to adjust to having you in their lives. I don't want them exposed to this kind of ugliness." From the kitchen came the sound of children's laughter. MJ was probably telling one of his elaborate jokes that only Mike understood. The sound strengthened Marcus's resolve. "I'll handle it," he promised. "But right now we have a date with some lions and tigers." The zoo trip started perfectly. The boys ran from exhibit to exhibit, their excitement contagious. Marcus found himself learning as much from their encyclopedic knowledge of animals as they learned from the educational signs. "Did you know that giraffes have the same number of neck bones as humans?" Mike informed him seriously. "They're just bigger." "And penguins mate for life," MJ added. "Like in that movie we watched, remember, Mummy?" Christina smiled. But Marcus noticed she kept glancing nervously at other visitors who were pointing and whispering news about the DNA. Test demands had spread quickly. They were watching the sea lion show when Marcus's phone buzzed. It was Sarah, his assistant, marked urgent. He stepped away to take the call. "Sir, Harrison just called an emergency board meeting. He's proposing a vote of no confidence. He claims your illegitimate family situation is destabilizing the company." Marcus looked back at his family. MJ was perched on Christina's shoulders for a better view, while Mike stood pressed against the railing, completely mesmerized by the performing sea lions. "Tell the board I'll be there in an hour," he said finally. Breaking the news to the boys that he had to leave early was one of the hardest things he'd ever done. Their disappointed faces haunted him as his driver rushed him back to Manhattan. The boardroom was tense when he arrived. James Harrison stood at the head of the table, his smile smugly confident. "Ah, Marcus, how kind of you to join us. I trust your family outing was pleasant?" Marcus straightened his tie, looking each board member in the eye. "Let me be clear. Those boys are my sons. No DNA test is needed, though I'll happily provide one to shut down these ridiculous rumors. But understand this, I will not choose between being a good father and being a good CEO. I can and will be both." "The numbers suggest otherwise," Harrison countered smoothly. "Your attention has been divided. The Chinese investors are still very much interested," Marcus interrupted. "In fact, I spoke with Mr. Chen this morning. He was quite impressed that I prioritize family values. Unlike some people in this room, he understands that a man who abandons his children isn't someone. You want handling your investments." The dig hit home. Harrison's own messy divorce and estrangement from his teenage daughter was well known in their circles. Back in Brooklyn that evening, Marcus found Christina sitting on her front stoop, looking worried. "The boys are inside with Mrs. Johnson," she said. "They've been asking why you left." Marcus sat beside her. I had to protect our family. Harrison was trying to use you and the boys to take control of the company. Maybe your mother is right, Christina said softly. Maybe this is too complicated. The boys were happy before, but I wasn't, Marcus cut in. And neither were they, not really. They needed their father. I needed them. We can make this work, Christina. We just need time. Inside, they could hear Mike and MJ arguing over which stuffed animal from the zoo gift shop was cooler, MJ's penguin or Mike's tiger. The ordinary sound of children's bickering had never seemed so precious to Marcus. I've missed so much, he said quietly. I won't miss anything else, no matter what it costs. Christina looked at him for a long moment. The Marcus I knew 5 years ago would have chosen the company. The Marcus you knew didn't know what it felt like to hold his sons, to hear them call him daddy. Some things are worth more than money. As if on cue, the front door opened, and 2 small bodies launched themselves at Marcus. Daddy, Mrs. Johnson made cookies and we saved you some. Looking at their hopeful faces, Marcus knew he'd made the right choice. Tomorrow he would deal with Harrison, the board, and the media. But tonight, he had cookies to eat with his sons. The DNA test results lay unopened on Marcus's desk for 3 days. He didn't need a piece of paper to tell him what his heart already knew, but the board had insisted. Now, as he finally opened the envelope, his hands trembled slightly. Sarah knocked and entered his office, her face worried. Sir, your mother is here with her lawyer. Before Marcus could respond, Eleanor swept in, followed by a stern-looking man in an expensive suit. The results? Eleanor demanded. Marcus held up the paper. 99.9% positive. Happy now, Mother. Can we stop pretending my sons aren't your grandsons? Eleanor sat down, smoothing her designer skirt. Now we can discuss custody arrangements. Custody? Arrangements? Marcus stared at his mother. What are you talking about? The lawyer stepped forward. Mrs. Reynolds has concerns about the children's current living situation. Given your position and resources, we believe a case could be made for primary custody. Get out. Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. Both of you, get out of my office right now. Marcus, be reasonable, Eleanor pleaded. Those boys are Reynolds' heirs. They should be raised in our world with all the advantages that made Christina feel so unwelcome she ran away. Marcus stood up, his anger building. The advantages of having a grandmother who questioned their existence before they were even born. Eleanor flinched. You know about that? Yes, Mother. I know exactly why Christina left. And now you want to try to take her children away? It's not happening, ever. After they left, Marcus drove to Brooklyn, his mind racing. He needed to warn Christina about his mother's plans. But when he arrived at her house, he found her sitting on the front steps, crying. Christina, what's wrong? Where are the boys? Inside with Mrs. Johnson, she sniffled. The school called today. Some reporter tried to get into their classroom to take pictures. The principal said it's becoming disruptive. Marcus sat beside her, his heart heavy. I'm so sorry. I'll hire security. That's not the answer. Christina stood up, pacing. Guards around their school, reporters hiding in bushes. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Inside, they could hear the boys playing, blissfully unaware of the chaos surrounding them. Their happy voices made the situation even more painful. I had another job offer, Christina said quietly. From an art school in California. They want me to run their children's program. Marcus felt his world tilting. You're not taking them away, not again. I'm trying to protect them. Your mother's lawyers have been calling. The media won't leave us alone. Every time we go out, people stare and whisper. It's not fair to them. And growing up without their father is fair. Marcus's voice cracked. Christina, please, we can figure this out. I'll step down as CEO if I have to. She looked at him in shock. You'd give up the company? For them? In a heartbeat. He took her hands in his. The boys need both of us. They need their mother's love and their father's protection. Together we're stronger. Before Christina could respond, they heard a crash from inside, followed by crying. They rushed in to find MJ on the floor, holding his arm while Mike hovered anxiously nearby. We were just playing superheroes, Mike explained tearfully. MJ tried to fly from the couch, Christina quickly checked MJ's arm, which was already swelling. "We need to take him to the emergency room." The next few hours were chaos. News of MJ's injury somehow leaked to the press, and by the time they reached the hospital, reporters were already gathering outside. Marcus had to call security to keep them away while doctors examined his son. Sitting in the emergency room, watching MJ get his arm x-rayed, Marcus made a decision. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Sarah, call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. And get me Robert Chen on the line. Yes, I know what time it is in Beijing. This can't wait." Christina looked at him questioningly as he hung up. "I'm restructuring the company," he explained. "Moving most operations to our West Coast office. The New York headquarters will still run, but I won't need to be there every day." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you take that job in California, we're coming with you, all of us. The boys need a fresh start, away from all this madness. And I need to be where my family is." MJ looked up from the x-ray table, his face brightening despite his pain. "We're moving to California, like where Disneyland is." The doctor chuckled as she finished wrapping his arm in a bright blue cast. "Just a sprain, but he'll need to take it easy for a few weeks." Mike, who hadn't left his twin's side, immediately asked, "Can I sign his cast first?" Later that night, after both boys were finally asleep in their own beds, Marcus and Christina sat in her small kitchen, drinking tea and talking about the future. "Are you sure about this?" Christina asked. "Moving across the country, changing your whole life." "I've never been more sure of anything," Marcus replied, "but I need to know you're sure too, that you won't run again when things get tough." Christina was quiet for a moment. "When I left 5 years ago, I was young and scared. I convinced myself I was protecting our babies, but really I was just running from my own fears. I won't make that mistake again." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we'll face whatever comes together, as a family." The next morning, Marcus walked into the board meeting with a confidence he hadn't felt in weeks. James Harrison was there, looking smug as usual. "Gentlemen," Marcus began, "I called this meeting to announce some changes. I'm restructuring the company's operations. I'll be moving to our California office to oversee the West Coast expansion personally." The room erupted in chaos. Harrison jumped to his feet. "This is exactly what I've been warning about. He's abandoning his responsibilities." "No, James," Marcus said calmly. "I'm embracing them. My most important responsibility is to my children. But make no mistake, I'm not leaving the company, I'm expanding it. Mr. Chen has already approved the restructuring plan. His investment group is actually increasing their stake, impressed by our commitment to both innovation and family values." Eleanor, who had insisted on attending, sat in stunned silence. Finally, she spoke up. "If you do this, if you take my grandsons away—" "They were always your grandsons, Mother. You just couldn't see past your own prejudices to love them. Maybe some distance will help you understand what really matters." That evening, Marcus sat with Mike and MJ in their bedroom, reading their favorite bedtime story. Both boys were excited about the move, already planning their first trip to Disneyland. "Daddy," Mike asked sleepily, "will you still be our daddy in California?" Marcus hugged his son close, his heart aching at the innocent question. "I'll be your daddy forever, no matter where we are. Nothing will ever change that." MJ held up his cast, now covered in signatures. "Look, Daddy signed it biggest of all." Christina appeared in the doorway, smiling at the scene. The past few weeks had been a roller coaster of emotions, but seeing Marcus with their sons made her realize they were making the right choice. Tomorrow they would start planning their move, facing new challenges and adventures. But tonight, in this moment, they were just a family, imperfect healing but together at last. Moving day arrived faster than anyone expected. Christina's brownstone was filled with boxes, and the twins couldn't contain their excitement about flying on their daddy's private plane. But not everyone was celebrating their fresh start. Mrs. Johnson stood in Christina's kitchen, wiping tears as she wrapped one last batch of her famous cookies for the boys. "Who's going to water my flowers when I'm away now? Those boys have been my little helpers for 4 years." Mike and MJ ran in, their shoes untied and their hair messy from playing. When they saw Mrs. Johnson crying, they rushed to hug her. "Don't cry, Mrs. Johnson," MJ said. "Daddy said we can use his computer to talk to you every day, and we'll send you pictures from Disneyland," Mike added, "and the beach." Marcus watched from the doorway, his heart full. In just a few weeks, these boys had changed his life completely. Now they were about to change it again. His phone buzzed. Another message from James Harrison. Since the announcement of the restructuring, Harrison had been trying everything to block the move. His latest trick was questioning the legality of Marcus taking the twins across state lines without a formal custody agreement. "The movers are here," Christina called from the front door. "Boys, go get your backpacks." As the twins thundered up the stairs, Christina noticed Marcus's worried expression. "What's wrong?" "Harrison's lawyers are trying to delay our departure. They're claiming we need court approval since we never formalized custody arrangements." Christina's face fell. "Can they do that?" "They can try." Marcus pulled her close. "But I've got our own lawyers handling it. Nothing is stopping us from giving our boys the fresh start they deserve." Suddenly, they heard a commotion outside. Eleanor Reynolds was getting out of her town car, looking unusually disheveled. "Mother?" Marcus stepped onto the porch. "What are you doing here?" Helena clutched her designer handbag like a shield. "You can't just take them away, they're my only grandchildren." Before Marcus could respond, the twins came barreling down the stairs. "Grandmother," they called out in unison, but stopped short of hugging her, remembering her usual stiff demeanor. To everyone's surprise, Eleanor knelt down, not caring about her expensive silk suit touching the ground. "Michael Marcus Jr., I've been a foolish old woman." The boys looked at each other confused. They'd never seen their grandmother like this. "I was so worried about appearances, about what other people would think, that I forgot what really matters." Eleanor's voice cracked. "You are perfect exactly as you are. You're smart and kind and wonderful, and I've been horrible to you and your mother." Christina stepped forward, putting a protective hand on each boy's shoulder. Eleanor looked up, at her, tears in her eyes. "Christina, I know I can never undo the hurt I caused. My prejudices drove you away, made you feel you had to hide my own grandchildren from us. I don't deserve forgiveness, but please, don't cut me out of their lives completely." Mike, always the more sensitive twin, moved to pat Eleanor's shoulder. "Don't cry, grandmother. We can use Daddy's computer to talk to you too, like Mrs. Johnson." Eleanor pulled both boys into a tight hug, not caring that MJ's cast wrinkled her silk blouse or that Mike's shoes were leaving dirt marks on her skirt. Marcus watched in amazement as his mother, who had never shown such emotion in public, openly cried while holding his sons. "I have a proposal," Eleanor said finally, standing up and trying to compose herself. "The Reynolds summer house in Malibu has been sitting empty for years. Let me sign it over to you, all of you. The boys should have a beach house for their California adventures." Christina started to protest, but Eleanor held up her hand. "Please, let me try to be the grandmother they deserve. Let me be part of their new beginning." Before anyone could respond, a sleek black car pulled up. James Harrison stepped out, waving legal papers. "I have a court order," he announced smugly. "No one is taking these children anywhere until a judge reviews the custody situation." Eleanor spun around, her tears replaced by fury. "James Harrison." "You snake," Harrison faltered, not expecting to see Eleanor there. "Mrs. Reynolds, I thought you'd want to protect your grandchildren's interests." "My grandchildren's interests." Eleanor's voice could have frozen fire. "Let me tell you about their interests. Their interest is in having both their loving parents. Their interest is in escaping vultures like you who want to use them as pawns in your corporate games." She turned to Marcus. "Darling, call the pilot. Tell him to prepare for one more passenger. I'm coming with you to California, just until you're settled. And I'm bringing every social and political connection I have to deal with this situation." Harrison's smug expression crumbled as Eleanor pulled out her phone. "Hello, Judge Matthews. Eleanor Reynolds here. Your wife and I were just discussing your daughter's wedding at the club." "Yes, about that court order your colleague just signed." Within an hour, Harrison's court order was suspended pending review. As the family prepared to leave, the entire neighborhood came out to say goodbye. Mrs. Johnson handed out cookies to everyone, including the movers. Even the reporters who had been camped out nearby were caught up in the emotional farewell. On the private jet, Mike and MJ couldn't contain their excitement, running up and down the aisle until Christina finally got them settled with their tablets. "Look, Daddy," MJ pointed out the window as they took off. "Everything looks so small. Like my old dollhouse," Eleanor added, surprising everyone by playing along. She had removed her designer jacket and was sitting on the floor with the boys, helping them build a Lego castle. Christina watched her former mother-in-law, soon-to-be mother-in-law again, if Marcus's hidden ring box was any indication, actually laughing as Mike's toy plane crashed into the castle. "Sometimes," she whispered to Marcus, "people can surprise you." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Sometimes they just need a reason to change. Our boys seem to have that effect on people." As New York disappeared beneath the clouds, Marcus looked at his family. Christina reading a story to MJ, Mike teaching Eleanor how to play his favorite iPad game, all of them together and happy. 5 years ago, he thought he had lost everything. Now he knew he had everything that truly mattered. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Welcome aboard, next stop Los Angeles, International Airport. Weather forecast, sunny skies ahead." Marcus smiled. Sunny skies indeed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As a family, MJ tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, when we get to California, can we get a dog?" "A big one," Mike chimed in, "to protect our new beach house." Eleanor looked up from the iPad. "I know an excellent breeder in Beverly Hills." Christina caught Marcus's eye, and they both laughed. Their new life was already beginning, and they hadn't even landed yet. The Malibu beach house took everyone's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of the Pacific Ocean, and the sound of waves filled every room. The twins ran from space to space, their excited voices echoing through the house. "Look, Mommy, we can see dolphins." Mike pressed his face against the glass. "And there's a pool," MJ added, already eyeing the sparkling water in the backyard. Eleanor smiled, proudly. "I had the house fully renovated last week. The boys' rooms are upstairs. I had them painted in their favorite colors." Christina raised an eyebrow. "How did you know their favorite colors?" "Mrs. Johnson might have helped," Eleanor admitted. "We've been texting." Marcus laughed, still amazed by his mother's transformation. But his laughter was cut short by an urgent call from the West Coast office. "Sir, we have a situation," his new assistant explained. "James Harrison is here." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Harrison? In California?" "He's meeting with the Silicon Valley investors, claiming the company's restructuring is just a cover for personal instability." Before Marcus could respond, he heard a splash, followed by Christina's scream. He ran to the pool area to find MJ in the water, still fully clothed, with Mike reaching out to help him. "I told you to wait," Christina scolded, pulling a dripping MJ from the pool. "You don't even have your swimsuit on." "But Mommy, I wanted. Had to see if I could swim with my cast." Eleanor appeared with warm towels. "Well, I suppose this is a good time to mention I hired a swimming instructor. She'll be here tomorrow." Christina started to object to Eleanor making decisions without consulting them, but Marcus stepped in. "That's actually a great idea, Mother. The boys need to learn water safety if we're living by the beach." Later that evening, after the twins were finally asleep in their new rooms, Marcus found Christina on the beach, staring at the sunset. "Having second thoughts?" he asked softly. "No. Yes. Maybe?" She sighed. "It's all happening so fast. The move, the new job, your mother living next door in the guest house." Eleanor living in the guest house was definitely not part of the original plan, Marcus agreed with a chuckle. "But she's really trying," Christina admitted. "Did you see her playing in the sand with the boys in her designer sundress?" Their conversation was interrupted by Eleanor calling from the deck. "You might want to see this." They rushed inside to find breaking news on the TV. James Harrison was giving a press conference outside the Silicon Valley office. "Reynolds Enterprises is in crisis," Harrison was saying. "Marcus Reynolds has abandoned his responsibilities, moving across the country on a whim. Our investors deserve stable leadership." Marcus reached for his phone, but Eleanor stopped him. "Allow me," she said, her voice steely. She dialed a number. "Robert, Eleanor Reynolds. Yes, I saw Harrison's little performance." "No, darling. Let me tell you what's really happening." Within an hour, Robert Chen himself released a statement fully supporting Marcus's leadership and announcing an additional billion-dollar investment in Reynolds Enterprises' West Coast expansion. "Mother," Marcus said, impressed, "remind me never to underestimate you." Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "I've been managing corporate politics since before you were born, darling. Now, about the boys' school." The next morning brought the swimming instructor, a former Olympic athlete named Sofia Rodriguez. The twins were instantly smitten with her gentle approach and patient teaching style. "Remember," Sofia explained, helping Mike float on his back, "the water is your friend. You just need to learn to trust it." Christina watched from a beach chair, working on lesson plans for her new job at the art school. The position started in 2 weeks, and she was both excited and nervous. A commotion from the beach drew their attention. 2 large dogs, a golden retriever and a German shepherd, came bounding across the sand, followed by a handsome man in his 40s. "Zeus! Apollo, come back here!" The dogs ran straight to the pool area where the twins squealed in delight. "I'm so sorry," the man said, finally catching up. "They usually behave better than this." Eleanor emerged from the guest house, and her eyes widened slightly. "Thomas Blake, is that you?" The man looked surprised. "Eleanor? I had no idea you were in Malibu." "You two know each other?" Marcus asked. "Thomas is one of California's top pediatricians," Eleanor explained, "and a longtime family friend. His father and your father were college roommates. The twins were already playing with the dogs, their swimming lesson forgotten." "Can we keep them?" MJ begged. "Those are Dr. Blake's dogs," Christina explained. "Actually," Thomas said, "I've been looking for a good home for them. I'm moving to a smaller place and they need more space." The boys turned to their parents with pleading eyes. "We did promise them a dog," Marcus reminded Christina, "and now they'd have 2, Mike added hopefully. Sophia laughed. "Well, my lesson time is almost up anyway. Same time tomorrow?" As the swimming instructor left, Thomas stayed to help the boys learn basic commands for Zeus and Apollo. Eleanor watched with an oddly knowing smile. "Thomas is single, you know," she mentioned casually to Christina, "and he's excellent with children." Christina's eyes widened. "Eleanor, Marcus and I are—" "Oh, I know, darling, I wasn't thinking of you." Eleanor's gaze drifted to Sophia's retreating figure. "I just think everyone deserves a chance at happiness." That night, as the family sat on the beach watching the sunset, the twins curled up with their new dogs, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. The corporate drama seemed distant compared to the joy of watching his sons experience their new life. "Daddy," Mike said sleepily, "is this our happy ending?" Marcus pulled his son closer. "No, buddy. This is our happy beginning." But life had other plans. As they headed back to the house, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message that would shake their newfound peace. DNA test results might have been tampered with. Harrison demanding new tests. Court hearing scheduled. Marcus looked at his family. Christina helping MJ collect seashells. Mike racing Apollo across the sand. Eleanor teaching the boys the names of the constellations appearing in the darkening sky. He wouldn't let anyone threaten their happiness. Not Harrison, not the courts, not anyone. The waves crashed against the shore, a constant reminder that life, like the ocean, was full of ups and downs. But with love and determination, they would weather any storm that came their way. The morning started like any other in their new Malibu life. Christina was helping the twins get ready for their first day at their new school, while Zeus and Apollo waited patiently by the door. But the peace was shattered when Marcus's lawyer, David Cohen, arrived unannounced. "Harrison's team found something," David said grimly, spreading documents across the kitchen island. "They're claiming they have evidence the original DNA test was compromised." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "That's impossible. I was there when the samples were taken. They're saying someone at the lab was bribed." David looked uncomfortable. "They're also suggesting Christina might have engineered the results. That's ridiculous." Eleanor burst in from the guest house, still in her silk robe. "I was there too. Everything was properly documented." Christina sat heavily on a nearby chair, her face pale. "They're never going to leave us alone, are they?" Before anyone could respond, they heard the twins coming down the stairs in their new school uniforms, chattering excitedly about their first day. "Daddy, look, we match." Mike twirled to show off his blazer. "And I fixed my tie all by myself," MJ added proudly, though his tie was notably crooked. Marcus quickly gathered the legal documents, hiding them from the boy's view. "You both look very handsome. Ready for your first day?" As Christina drove the twins to school, Marcus and David strategized in the home office. Eleanor paced nearby, making calls to her extensive network of connections. "We need to get ahead of this," David advised. "Harrison's team is pushing for an emergency hearing. They're claiming the children should be returned to New York pending a new investigation." "Returned?" Marcus's voice shook with anger. "They're not property to be returned. They're my sons." "Of course they are," Eleanor said firmly. "Anyone with eyes can see that. But we need to be strategic." She turned to David. "What about Judge Williams? She owes me a favor after that charity gala last year." But their planning was interrupted by an urgent call from Christina. "Marcus," her voice was trembling, "there are reporters outside the school. They're asking the twins questions about DNA tests." The principal had to call security. Marcus was already grabbing his car keys. "I'm on my way. Mother, call Thomas. We might need a doctor's statement about the boy's well-being." When Marcus arrived at the school, he found Christina, trying to shield the twins from flashing cameras while reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Reynolds, is it true the DNA test was faked? Mrs. Reynolds, did you bribe the lab technician? Boys, do you want to stay with your father?" Mike was crying, clutching his brother's hand. MJ looked scared but was trying to be brave, just like his father always told him to be. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Enough!" Thomas Blake pushed through the crowd, his white doctor's coat lending him authority. "These are children, not circus attractions. Back off or I'll have every one of you charged with harassment of minors." The school security finally managed to clear a path, and Marcus rushed his family inside. In the principal's office, Mike crawled into his lap while MJ clung to Christina. "Maybe we should take them home," Christina suggested softly. "No," Marcus said firmly. "We can't let Harrison win. We can't let him disrupt their lives." Thomas, who had followed them in, knelt before the twins. "Hey guys, remember what we learned about being brave with Zeus and Apollo? Sometimes scary things happen, but we face them together." The boys nodded, wiping their tears. "Tell you what," Thomas continued. "Why don't I walk you to your classroom? I heard there's a class pet, a rabbit named Snowball." The mention of the rabbit perked the twins up immediately. As Thomas led them out, Eleanor arrived, looking fierce. "I've called every news outlet in California," she announced. "They'll be receiving cease and desist letters within the hour. No one harasses my grandsons." The principal, Dr. Martinez, cleared her throat. "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, I want you to know we take our students' safety very seriously. We'll be increasing security and implementing a strict no-media policy." Later that afternoon, as the family gathered at home trying to process the day's events, Sophia arrived for the twins' swimming lesson. "I saw the news," she said sympathetically. "How are they doing?" The boys were already changing into their swim trunks, seeming to have bounced back from the morning's trauma. Children's resilience was remarkable. "They're stronger than we think," Christina said, watching them splash into the pool under Sophia's watchful eye. Marcus wrapped his arm around her. "They get that from their mother." Eleanor watched the swimming lesson from her usual spot, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. Finally, she spoke up. "I made some calls to my old friends in New York society. Harrison's been making enemies there too. His daughter Claire, the one he's estranged from. She's willing to speak about why she cut ties with him." Marcus turned to his mother in surprise. "What do you mean?" "It seems Harrison has a history of using children as pawns in his business dealings. Claire claims he tried to force her to marry a business partner's son to secure a merger." Before they could discuss this further, they heard excited shouts from the pool. "Look, Daddy, I can swim without the float," Mike called out. "Me too," MJ demonstrated, though Sophia kept a careful hand nearby. Thomas, who had stopped by to check on the boys after the morning's chaos, watched the scene with a gentle smile. "They're adjusting well despite everything. Children often show us how to move forward." Eleanor noticed Sophia glancing at Thomas appreciatively and hid a smile. Her matchmaking instincts were never wrong. That evening, after the twins were asleep, the adults gathered in the living room to plan their strategy. David had brought in a team of investigators to look into Harrison's claims about the DNA test. "We need to be Prepared for anything, David warned. Harrison's desperate. The company's stock has been rising since the West Coast expansion announcement. He's losing support. Let him come after me, Marcus said, his voice hard. But he crosses a line when he targets my children. Christina touched his arm gently. We need to think about what's best for the boys. All this stress, the media attention, what they need is stability, Thomas interjected. As their doctor, I can testify that they're thriving here, despite Harrison's attempts to disrupt their lives. Sophia, who had stayed for dinner at Eleanor's insistence, spoke up. They're making real progress in their swimming. Their confidence grows every day. That's something the court should consider. Eleanor watched the group with satisfaction. They were building a strong support system here, exactly what the family needed. The next morning, as Marcus prepared for a video conference with the board, he found Mike sitting in his home office looking thoughtful. What's on your mind, buddy? Daddy, is that bad man trying to take us away? Marcus's heart clenched. He pulled his son onto his lap. Nobody is taking you away. Ever. You and your brother belong here with Mommy and me. Promise? I promise. Marcus held his son close. Some people might try to cause trouble, but nothing can change the fact that you're my boys. Nothing. Looking into Mike's trusting eyes, his own eyes, Marcus felt his resolve strengthen. Harrison could question all the DNA tests in the world, but nothing could break the bond he had with his sons. Some truths went deeper than science could measure. As if on cue, MJ burst in with Zeus and Apollo in tow. Daddy, the dogs found a crab on the beach. Marcus smiled, watching his sons examine their discovery. Let Harrison try his worst. This was what mattered. These moments, these smiles, this love. And he would fight with everything he had to protect it. Christina's first art exhibition at the new school should have been a celebration. The gallery walls were covered with children's artwork, including several vibrant paintings by Mike and MJ. But the happy occasion was overshadowed by the manila envelope that arrived that morning. They're demanding the boys appear in court next week, Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. Harrison's lawyers want them questioned by a child psychologist. Questioned about what? Christina's hands trembled as she adjusted one of the student paintings. About whether they know who their father is. They're 4 years old. Eleanor, who had been supervising the catering setup, immediately pulled out her phone. I'm calling Judge Williams right now. This is harassment. But before she could dial, Thomas Blake rushed in, looking worried. You need to see this. He held up his tablet, showing a breaking news story. James Harrison stood at a podium in New York, Claire Harrison at his side. The headline made Marcus's blood run cold. Harrison daughter recants, my father was right all along. I regret my earlier statements, Claire was saying, her face oddly blank. My father has always had my best interests at heart. His concerns about the Reynolds children are legitimate. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Something's not right. Last week, she was ready to testify against him. Money talks, Thomas said grimly. My colleague at the hospital knows Claire's husband. Apparently, Harrison threatened to expose some gambling debts if they didn't cooperate. The gallery was starting to fill with parents and students. Mike and MJ ran in, excited to show off their artwork to their father. Daddy, look, I painted our beach. Mike pointed to a swirl of blues and yellows. And I painted Zeus and Apollo, MJ added proudly, indicating a painting where the dogs looked more like friendly bears. Marcus forced a smile, trying to hide his worry. They're beautiful boys. You're both very talented, just like your mother. Sophia arrived then, having come straight from teaching swimming lessons at another client's house. She was becoming a close family friend, especially since she and Thomas had started dating. The boys' paintings are wonderful, she said, then lowered her voice. I heard about the court summons. How can they do this to children? Before anyone could respond, a commotion erupted at the gallery entrance. James Harrison himself walked in, flanked by lawyers. What a charming exhibition, he said smoothly, though perhaps a bit simple for the heirs to the Reynolds fortune. Marcus stepped forward, but Christina reached Harrison first. Get out, she said, her voice shaking with fury. You have no right to be here. Actually, I do. Harrison smiled coldly. As a concerned member of the Reynolds Enterprises board, I have every right to assess the environment where the potential heirs are being raised. The twins, sensing the tension, moved closer to their parents. Harrison's eyes fixed on them, studying their features with calculating interest. Remarkable resemblance, he mused. Almost too perfect, one might say. Makes one wonder about the authenticity. That's enough. Thomas stepped forward, his usual gentle demeanor replaced by professional authority. As these children's doctor, I'm officially stating that your presence is causing them distress. Leave now or I'll call the police. Harrison held up his hands in mock surrender. No need for threats, I merely wanted to see for myself. He looked directly at Marcus. The board meeting next week should be interesting, especially when I present my evidence about the original DNA testing facility. After he left, Eleanor made a series of rapid-fire phone calls while Marcus and Christina tried to salvage the exhibition. The twins were unsettled, picking up on the adult's anxiety. Why? Was that man looking at us funny? Mike whispered to MJ. Maybe he's just jealous because our paintings are better than his, MJ whispered back, making his brother giggle. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, the family gathered in the living room with Thomas, Sophia, and David Cohen, who had rushed over after hearing about Harrison's appearance. He's planning something big, David warned. My sources say he's been meeting with board members privately, showing them some kind of documentation. Could he really have evidence about the DNA test being compromised? Christina asked, her voice small. It doesn't matter, Marcus said firmly. Those are my sons. I don't need a test to tell me what my heart knows. Eleanor stood up suddenly. I think it's time I made a trip to New York. Everyone looked at her in surprise. Claire Harrison and I were close once, she explained. She used to spend summers with us when she was young. Perhaps she needs someone to remind her what it's like to have a parent who puts their child first. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. And I have colleagues at the original testing facility. I can look into Harrison's claims directly. Sophia squeezed his hand proudly. Their relationship had blossomed quickly, brought closer by their shared dedication to helping the Reynolds family. I'm coming with you, Mother, Marcus decided. The board needs to see I'm not afraid of Harrison's accusations. Christina started to object, but he cut her off gently. I'll be back before the boys' school play next week. I promised them I'd be there, and I keep my promises. That night, as they lay in bed, Christina curled into Marcus's arms. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of losing the money or the lifestyle, but of losing this, our family, our happiness. Listen to me, Marcus said, pulling her closer. 5 years ago I lost you because I was too focused on the empire, on what other people thought. I won't make that mistake again. Harrison can take the company if he wants. He can't take what really matters. The boys need stability, Christina whispered. All this fighting, the court appearances, the media, it's not fair to them. No, it's not. Which is why I've made a decision. Marcus sat up, his face serious. If Harrison wants the company so badly, maybe we should let him have it. Christina stared at him in shock. What? I've been talking to Robert Chen. He's interested in backing a new venture, something smaller, more focused on sustainable development, something I could run from here, spend more time with the family. But Reynolds Enterprises, it's your legacy. Marcus smiled softly. No, our boys are my legacy. Everything else is just business. The next morning, as Marcus packed for New York, the twins helped in their own way, adding their favorite stuffed animals to his suitcase. To keep you company, Daddy. When will you be back? Mike asked, his lower lip trembling. Very soon, Marcus promised. Just in time to see you be the best tree in the school play. I'm not a tree anymore, Mike giggled. Ms. Rodriguez said I can be a superhero. Even better. Marcus scooped both boys into a tight hug, breathing in their familiar scent, memorizing their laughter. As his private jet took off, Marcus watched the Malibu coastline disappear beneath the clouds. Eleanor sat across from him, already planning their strategy. Claire will listen to reason, she said confidently. She just needs to remember who she really is. Marcus nodded, but his mind was on the family he was leaving behind. Christina would be starting her first full week of teaching. The boys had swimming lessons with Sophia. Thomas was taking them to the zoo on Saturday. His phone buzzed with a message from Christina. A photo of the twins at breakfast, both giving thumbs up to the camera. The caption read, "We love you, Daddy. Show that mean man who's boss." Marcus smiled, feeling his determination strengthen. Harrison had no idea what he was up against, because this wasn't just about business anymore. This was about family, and Marcus Reynolds would move heaven and earth to protect his. The New York boardroom felt cold and unfamiliar after weeks in sunny California. Marcus sat at the head of the table, Eleanor beside him, as James Harrison made his presentation to the board. "These documents prove the DNA testing facility was compromised," Harrison declared, passing out folders. "Someone paid the technician to falsify results, and I think we all know who had the most to gain." Before Marcus could respond, the boardroom doors burst open. Claire Harrison stood there, her face pale but determined. Behind her was Thomas Blake, who had flown in the night before. "That's a lie," Claire announced, "and I can't be part of it anymore." James Harrison's face darkened. "Claire, remember our discussion about how you'd ruin David's career if I didn't help you?" Claire's voice shook. "I remember, Father. Just like I remember when you tried to force me to marry someone to help your business. You haven't changed at all." Thomas stepped forward, holding up a file. "I spoke with the testing facility's director. Personally, the technician Harrison claims was bribed. She's been on maternity leave since before the tests were conducted. She wasn't even in the building." Eleanor smiled triumphantly. "Did you really think we wouldn't investigate your claims, James?" But Harrison wasn't finished. He pulled out one last document, then explained this. A private investigator found evidence that Christina Thompson was seen entering another DNA testing facility 2 weeks before the official test. Marcus felt his world tilt. He looked at Thomas, who nodded slightly. "Yes, Christina went to another facility," Thomas confirmed, "because she wanted to be absolutely certain before the official test. She was protecting the boys from exactly this kind of situation. Back in Malibu, Christina was trying to focus on preparing the twins for their school play that evening. Mike was practicing his superhero poses, while MJ struggled with his cape. "When is Daddy coming home?" Mike asked for the 100th time. "He promised he'd be here," Christina assured him, though her own heart was anxious. She hadn't heard from Marcus since he texted that he was heading into the board meeting. Sophia arrived to help with the costumes, bringing a surprise visitor, Mrs. Johnson from Brooklyn. "Mrs. Johnson!" the twins screamed in unison, running to hug their former neighbor. "I couldn't miss my favorite superheroes in their big play," Mrs. Johnson laughed. "Your grandmother arranged everything." The boys dragged Mrs. Johnson to see their new rooms, their artwork, and of course, Zeus and Apollo. Christina used the moment to check her phone again. Still no message from Marcus. "He'll be here," Sophia said softly. "He's never broken a promise to them." In New York, the board meeting had devolved into chaos. Harrison was shouting about company, stability, while Claire was revealing years of his manipulative business tactics. "Enough," Marcus's voice cut through the noise. "This ends now." He stood up, looking each board member in the eye. "Yes, I moved to California to be with my family. Yes, I chose my sons over sitting in this boardroom every day, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." He pulled out his own stack of documents. "Here's what Harrison doesn't want you to see. Since our West Coast expansion, our stock has risen 15%. Our new sustainable development projects have attracted billions in foreign investment. And our employee satisfaction rates are at an all-time high. But more importantly," he continued, his voice softening, "I found something worth more than all of this. I found my sons, I found love, I found what really matters." He turned to Harrison. "You can have it." The room fell silent. "What?" Harrison stammered. "The company. My shares. You can have it all, with conditions. First, you sign an ironclad agreement never to contest my children's paternity again. Second, you publicly apologize to Christina and the boys for the harassment. And third, you make things right with your own daughter." Harrison's face turned red. "You can't be serious. You'd give up everything?" "No," Marcus smiled. "I'm keeping everything that matters. The rest is just business." Eleanor stood up. "I second my son's offer. The Reynolds family shares, combined with Robert Chen's proxy, represent a controlling interest. Do you accept, James?" Before Harrison could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from Christina. The play starts in an hour. The boys keep asking for their daddy. Marcus looked at his mother. Handle the paperwork. I have a promise to keep. His private jet broke several speed records getting back to California. As he rushed into the school auditorium, he could hear the principal making opening announcements. Christina was waiting in the hallway, pacing nervously. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. You made it. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, he pulled her close. It's over. Harrison can't hurt us anymore. The company doesn't matter. He kissed her softly. I have everything I need. Right here. The classroom door opened and Mike peeked out in his superhero costume. His face lit up. Daddy! MJ appeared beside his brother, cape askew. You came! Marcus knelt down, straightening MJ's cape and adjusting Mike's mask. Of course I came, I promised, didn't I? The play was, in Marcus's completely unbiased opinion, the greatest theatrical performance in history. Mike saved the day with his superhero powers, while MJ, as his trusty sidekick, helped defeat the evil vegetables who didn't want kids to eat their dessert. The audience was full of their new California family, Sophia and Thomas holding hands, Mrs. Johnson wiping proud tears, Eleanor beaming from the front row. Even Robert Chen had flown in to show his support. After the play, as the twins excitedly recounted every moment to anyone who would listen, Marcus pulled Christina aside. There's something I've been wanting to ask you, he began, reaching into his pocket. 5 years ago, I lost you because I forgot what was really important. I won't make that mistake again. He knelt down, holding out a ring. Christina Thompson, will you marry me again? The twins, noticing what was happening, ran over. Say yes, Mommy, Mike bounced excitedly. We can be ring bearers, MJ added. Christina looked at her family, the man she'd never stopped loving, the sons who were their greatest blessing, and all the people who had become part of their California dream. Yes, she whispered. Yes to everything. As Marcus slipped the ring on her finger, Eleanor discreetly wiped away tears, while Mrs. Johnson openly sobbed. Sophia leaned against Thomas, who was already offering to help plan the beach wedding. The twins hugged their parents' legs, creating a perfect family circle. Zeus and Apollo, who had been waiting in Eleanor's car, were brought in to join the celebration, their tails wagging with joy. Are you sad about the company, Daddy? Mike asked perceptively. Marcus lifted his son up, feeling MJ climb into his other arm. How could I be sad? I have everything a man could ever want right here. Christina reached up to wipe a smudge of superhero face paint from Mike's cheek. What happens now? Marcus looked at his family, the one he'd lost and found. Again, the one that had grown stronger through every challenge. Now, he said, we live happily ever after. But life, as they all knew, was never quite that simple. Even as they celebrated, Harrison was making one last desperate move that would test their family in ways they never expected. The Malibu beach was transformed into a wonderland of white flowers and twinkling lights. In just 3 months, Marcus and Christina had planned the perfect sunset wedding. The twins were practicing their ring-bearer duties with Zeus and Apollo trotting faithfully beside them. But 2 days before the ceremony, Harrison made his final, desperate move. He's filed an emergency injunction, David Cohen announced grimly. He's claiming the company transfer can't go through until the paternity issue is fully resolved. Marcus looked up from where he was helping MJ with his bow tie. He signed the agreement, it's over. He's claiming duress, David explained. Says he was coerced into signing away his rights to the company. Eleanor burst in from the guest house, her face flushed with anger. That snake. After everything Claire revealed about him, where is Claire now? Christina asked, concerned for the young woman who had helped them. Safe, Thomas assured them. He and Sophia had been helping Claire rebuild her life away from her father's influence. She's staying at my sister's ranch in Montana. The twins, picking up on the tension, huddled closer to their parents. Is the bad man trying to hurt us again? Mike asked quietly. Marcus gathered both boys into his arms. No one can hurt us, buddy. We're stronger together, remember? That evening, as the family sat on their beach watching the sunset, Eleanor made an announcement. I've been doing some thinking, she said, watching the twins build a sandcastle. Harrison's real problem isn't with the DNA test or the company. It's about legacy. Christina looked confused. What do you mean? He's alone, Eleanor explained. His own daughter won't speak to him. He has no grandchildren, no family love. He's watching Marcus choose family over fortune, and it's driving him mad with jealousy. Marcus considered this. So what are you suggesting? I think it's time we showed him exactly what he's fighting against. Eleanor smiled mysteriously. And I know just how to do it. The next morning, Harrison arrived at his office to find his waiting room full of familiar faces. Claire was there along with his ex, Susan. But most surprisingly, his estranged brother Michael, whom he hadn't spoken to in 20 years, sat quietly in the corner. What is this? Harrison demanded. An intervention, said softly, because someone reminded us that family is worth fighting for, even when that family has lost its way. Eleanor stepped out of the shadows. Hello, James. Remember when our children were young? How you and Michael would bring Claire to play with Marcus? Those summer barbecues at the Hamptons house? Harrison's stern facade cracked slightly. That was a long time ago. It doesn't have to be just memories, Eleanor said gently. Look what? Holding on to bitterness has cost you. Your daughter, your brother, your chance to know your nieces and nephews. You're so focused on destroying Marcus's happiness, Claire added, that you can't see how to find your own. Meanwhile, back in Malibu, final preparations for the wedding were underway. Sophia was helping Christina with her dress, while Thomas entertained the twins with stories about their father's childhood, carefully edited versions he'd heard from Eleanor. And then your daddy jumped into the pool with all his clothes on, Thomas chuckled, just because your Aunt Claire dared him to. The boys giggled, but Mike looked thoughtful. Is Aunt Claire coming to the wedding? We hope so, buddy, Marcus said, entering with his phone in hand. And I just got some news that might make that possible. Harrison had withdrawn his injunction. More than that, he'd issued a public statement apologizing for his actions and announcing his retirement. Claire would take over his shares of the company working alongside Marcus's new sustainable development venture. Sometimes, Marcus told his sons, people just need to remember what really matters. The wedding day dawned perfect and clear. The beach was filled with their extended family, not just blood relatives, but all the people who had become part of their story. Mrs. Johnson sat in the front row, already crying happy tears. Sophia and Thomas stood with the wedding party, their own engagement rings sparkling in the sunlight. To everyone's surprise, Harrison came, too, standing quietly at the back with his brother Michael. When the twins spotted Claire, they ran to hug their honorary aunt, who swooped them up with laughing tears. Eleanor watched it all from her seat of honor, remembering how she had once fought against Christina and Marcus's love. Now she couldn't imagine their family any other way. The ceremony began as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. Mike and MJ walked carefully down the sandy aisle, Zeus and Apollo padding regally beside them, all four taking their bearer duties very seriously. Christina appeared like a vision in her simple white dress, but Marcus couldn't take his eyes off her face. The same face he'd fallen in love with all those years ago, now even more beautiful for all they'd been through together. Dearly beloved, the minister began, but had to pause as MJ loudly whispered, That's our mommy and daddy, causing everyone to laugh. The vows they exchanged were simple but profound. Christina, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, 5 years ago, I lost sight of what mattered most. But fate gave us a second chance, and I promised to spend every day showing you and our boys how precious you are to me. Christina wiped away tears. Marcus, you found us when we needed you most. You chose love over everything else. You've shown our sons what it means to be a real father, a real man. I promise to love you more each day. The twins insisted on adding their own promises. I promise to clean my room, Mike announced solemnly. Most days, MJ added, making the guests chuckle. As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant golds and pinks. Marcus kissed his bride while their sons cheered and the dogs barked their approval. At the reception, Eleanor clinked her glass for a toast. To second chances, she said, looking meaningfully at Harrison, who nodded slightly, and to the love that gives us courage to change. Later, as music played and people danced on the beach, Marcus held his family close. The twins were sleepy, but fighting to stay awake, not wanting to miss a moment of the celebration. "Are you happy, Daddy?" Mike asked, yawning. Marcus looked at his sons, at his beautiful wife, at all the people who had become part of their journey. He remembered that moment in the airport when he first saw his boys, how his world had changed in an instant. "I've never been happier, buddy," he said truthfully. Christina leaned against him, watching as Thomas twirled Sophia across the dance floor, as Claire laughed at something her father said, as Eleanor taught the twins a silly dance move. "You know," she said softly, "when I left 5 years ago, I thought I was running away from something. But maybe I was running toward this moment, this perfect future." "No more running," Marcus promised, kissing her tenderly. "No," Christina agreed. "We're home." The party continued under the stars, but Marcus and Christina slipped away to walk along the water's edge with their sons. Zeus and Apollo romped in the surf, while the twins collected seashells by moonlight. This was their happily ever after, not perfect but real, built on love, strengthened by challenges, and made complete by 2 little boys with their father's eyes and their mother's heart. As they walked back toward the lights and music, Mike asked, "Daddy, are we rich now?" Marcus lifted his son onto his shoulders while Christina carried a sleepy MJ. "Buddy, we've been rich all along. Some things are worth more than money, like love." MJ mumbled against his mother's neck. "Exactly like love," Christina answered, squeezing Marcus's hand. And there, on their beautiful beach, with their children in their arms and their future bright before them, Marcus and Christina knew that every trial, every tear, every moment of their journey had led them exactly where they were meant to be. Together, a family, forever.